Hello, good people. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to CTN Media, where we are changing the narrative. I'm your girl, Shay, of course, the host of today's amazing panel. I'm super excited because we have a lot of people that are joining us for some much needed conversation. So do me a favor, before we get started, I need everybody to share this out on your network. Yes, share this out. Create a watch party. Subscribe, like, share. Again, we're on YouTube at CTN Media, where you can change the narrative with us, or you can find us at BBI, the Black Business Initiative on Facebook, and you can follow us there. It's important that we support independent Black media so we can have conversations like this that don't always make it to mainstream media. We know in the month, there's been a lot of coverage going on about what's happening in our community. But who's covering that coverage the right way? Who's talking to our community? Who's talking to our leaders? And who's holding who accountable? Well, today we're going to dig in, and we're going to dig in with some people that I think you're going to enjoy hearing from. So today, joining me for this robust conversation, first I want to give it up to two amazing pillars in the community, NAACP's very own Madam President Sondra Young.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. My guy, who I still don't understand how he's not mayor, which is why I'll never move to Aurora, the one and only Omar Montgomery.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. As you know, this woman right here is a trailblazer on her own. You might know her mother, Miss Rodney Fields, but if you don't know Maisha Fields, you better get to know her. Doing amazing things right here in our very own community.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And of course, my partner in purpose, the co-owner of this amazing network, the one and only Jice Johnson, Black Business Initiative.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Some other people might be joining us later, and feel free to comment, engage, share, because this conversation is not just about us, but this conversation is for you. One of the beautiful things that I think that we are really starting a moment of unity, understanding that this conversation has to happen with everyone at the table. We no longer can afford to have one person at the table, two people, or only the person you like at the table. We need all voices at the table, all hands on deck. It's time to really talk about change. Today, we have titled this conversation, what are our next steps, what are we demanding, and what are our calls to action? We no longer just want to have a conversation, but we want to get to the root of what is next. So as we unite in this conversation, please bring somebody along for this very, very necessary conversation. One of my favorite quotes I want to start this out with is from my guy, Martin Luther King Jr. Why not? And the quote is, the time is always right to do what is right. So for those of you just now tuning in, again, the time is always right to do what is right. We're looking at the things that are happening to our nation. We're looking at our culture. And one thing that I'm sure we all agree on is that our community is not okay. And trying to figure out how do we be okay? And who do we hold accountable in this moment? And what are our next steps? So let's just jump into some heavy conversation. But I just want to start off by maybe talking about the climate of right now. And Madam President, if you could just start us off just addressing what is the climate of culture in Colorado right now? What is the climate for Black people right now?
I think that we are angry and we have a right to be, but I also think that we're in a place to make change and to evolve differently and to change and build a new narrative of how people see us and who we are. And so I think that even though this is not where we want to be as a nation of people, because we've been here for so long, right? We've been here for over 600 years, just not even going back to 4. We've been here forever in this place and in this space. And so, but like I said, I think it's an opportunity for us to really change the narrative of how we are represented and how people see us. And I think that if we don't take this time, we'll look up 20 years from now and this will still be the conversation. So now is the time for us to dig in deep and make substantial change. Even teaching our children about how to advocate at this time is necessary. That needs to be in school systems. We need to be able to tell our kids, this is what you do for yourself. And even, we cannot let people just keep making protest be justice. And so I think now is the time for us to change that whole narrative.
Oh, you hit on everything in so many different capacities. When we're looking at Omar, and I would love for you to kind of piggyback on this, and I think it's so important to have a man's voice in this. But when we're talking about, we're watching our brothers being killed, we're watching our sisters being killed. And like Madam President said, we're watching protests actually take the front line for the work that actually needs to be done. What do you see in regards to these protests and what is really using this protest as saying like this is our marching ground, but we know we can do so much more. And looking at somebody like John Lewis who's passed away, and sadly to me, I think he passed away, and we're still going through a lot of the things that he's been fighting for his whole life. What do you feel in that reference to all those things?
Let's talk about first commending every single person who's been on the front lines of the protest. Number one, yes. Many of our young people, some in high school, some in college, some just young adults, and I think of people like Patrick, Sam, 10 for 10. I think about some of the other young brothers and sisters that are out there. I'm thinking about Lindsay. I'm thinking about April. I'm thinking about Candace. I'm thinking about all these individuals that are out there putting their lives at risk, putting their family lives at risk so that we can have change. And everyone has their role. And what they're saying is, and if you listen to their tagline, time is up. Because for over 400 years, we have been asking, protesting, fighting, and now it's time for systemic change. It's time to have advocacy with systemic change. With the protest, we need a plan. With the protest, we need to invest. With the protest, we also need to look at some of the challenges in our own community and make sure that we apply some of those resources that we're protesting for to end systemic and urban violence in our communities, to build families and to build wealth.
Ooh, yes, and I think I want to piggyback on that. Thank you for all you that are out there doing the work. And we know, especially during this pandemic, it's not an easy thing to be out there on that front line. Maisha, when I think about what policy change looks like and systemic change, I think of you a lot in this field. And when people are saying our politicians don't care, they're not listening to us, what's your response to that?
You know, I would say that politics is a full contact sport. It's no different than football or hockey, except in politics, you don't get to wear protective gear. So we have a lot of people who want to be involved in social media protests or Twitter, social activism, but we need to be front and center when it comes to creating good public policy, because good public policy comes from the people. The reason we were able to pass Senate Bill 217, it was the people who raised up and said, we require, we mandate, and we will not leave until we have greater transparency and accountability as it relates to the police. The reason that we have a witness protection program is because a woman by the name of Senator Rodney Fields said, the police never protected my son, even though he was going to be a witness. And so she established the witness protection program. The reason women today in the state of Colorado who are pregnant have access to dental care when they're on Medicaid is because pregnant women, and specifically Black women, who were losing their teeth while they were pregnant because of the lack of calcium they had while they were pregnant. The reason those women got access to dental health services was because they executed their democracy and their right to be involved in public policy. So it's important that everyone knows that your vote matters. And anytime a public official ignores your call, dismisses an opportunity to speak with you or engage with you, it's time for them to be cut. No different than the NFL would cut you if you weren't able to catch a play.
Ooh, maybe I should do a trigger alert or something in the top of this. I don't know. It's like a couple people like to get a little triggered, but this is the conversation we need. I see a lot of people tuning in. Do me a favor, share this out on your network. This conversation has to take place in our community. Joyce, I know when we talk about what this looks like, we talk about so many sectors of this, and I would love for you to chime in as my co-host today on the questions that we have for what are our next steps? What do we do? Some of those questions that you and I have been going back and forth with, I would love for you to chime in on that matter.
Yeah, I think it's really time for our community to organize in a way that I think we haven't seen. Well, let me not say that we haven't seen. I think that we have clear examples of what it looks like to organize in our community. And part of that is that some of those who did the original organizing are still hanging on to the helm there when you have a whole new generation who's ready to, organize, right? And so there has to be some semblance of the older generation and the younger generation. I'm a millennial. I still claim the younger generation and also Gen Z. So shout out to them because they've been doing some amazing work. Right. But our three generations have to come together in a way that we can organize and take what has worked in the past and begin to move that forward. And so I was just asked recently by a sister in the community, like, what does it look like? What does it mean to organize, right? And she was frustrated because she asked a community leader that, like, what do you mean by organize? And at the moment, he didn't really have an answer. It was just like organize, right? And so I think we need to be clear. We need to have some 101 steps for those who are just waking up and are really recognizing, the situation at hand. The mom herself that was involved in this latest incident in Aurora, she acknowledged that she had not been part of the protest, right? But now that this is something that happened to her, she wanted to pay more attention. And I think that is something that we are seeing often, is that we have people who are checked out until it is their, family on the front line. And they say, oh, maybe we need to check in. And so how do we start to activate our community in a way that extends past the disruption, but also begins to make the systemic change? And I think it's going to take all of our generations working together. We need the knowledge of what's worked in the past, as well as the future generation or the Gen Z millennial generation, to be able to talk about how we take those same fundamental tactics and move them into the future. So I think that's where we're at.
Absolutely. I think with that, I definitely want to go into this Aurora issue. And when we're looking at this, I know that Aurora is not the only person with issues. Denver has an issue. And this is why we call for Denver and Aurora to unite, so we can talk about what that looks like, because a lot of these changes can't just happen in Aurora. They can't just happen in Denver. They need to happen across the board. When we talk about the incident that happened right here in Aurora, Colorado, where we see a family laying on the hot cement with guns drawn on them, I'm a 6-year-old baby girl. And this is starting to be a little bit too normalized for me. When we're looking at, we're still marching in hope for a little piece of justice for Elijah McClain. And then when all eyes are on them, something like this can still happen in Aurora Police Department. And on top of that, we now have a police chief that was the intern that now has been voted into the position where all these things have happened under her watch. Mr. Montgomery, please address this. Please, I need some light in this tunnel. I don't understand. I need to understand the fundamentals of this. I need to understand this is not okay. And we're not okay because of this.
I was thoroughly sickened by what I saw. The little girl that had the princess outfit on, and her watching her family being handcuffed. She'll never get that vision out of her head. Probably her first encounter with law enforcement was that incident right there. And when we talk about trying to bridge that gap between the community and law enforcement, it just opened a little wider. It didn't come closer. It opened wider because everybody heard the cries of that little girl and the other children that were on the ground. Yes. I put out the Aurora branch of the NAACP put out a statement. And in our statement, one of the main things we said is that there is a cultural problem in the city of Aurora. The concept of policing circumvents common sense in certain situations. One of the first things you heard that came out of the mouth of individuals talking about this, well, that is how we are trained. But how do you treat human beings and how you train is two different things when you need to have a common sense approach at certain times. We are calling for them to do a culture climate survey, change the culture of that police department, and begin to embrace what the community has been crying out for years. Expedite this process to have an independent review board, make sure we have diversity on the Civil Service Commission, which is one of the things we have achieved. And more importantly, at the upper division of Aurora Police Department, where you have all the division chiefs and where you have the deputy chief there's no diversity. We're calling for bringing some diversity and more people talking to the chief before decisions are being made. Those are just some of the things, but we have a whole list of things that we're trying to accomplish to change the culture of Aurora PD.
Joyce, I see. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, and it's amazing because there's a lack of accountability and responsibility, right? Because at the same time that they're saying, well, that's how we're trained, they're also trained to double check before they pull someone over. So had they been following their training, right, this wouldn't have even happened because they wouldn't have pulled over the wrong vehicle. So it's interesting to use, this is how we're trained when you do something that is violent, but not, this is how we're trained when you go against your own protocol that enacted the violence in the first place. So I think that we can't allow for that double speak to exist, and the chief needs to make it a clear part of how this, plays out. Either you're following the book or you're not following the book, and you don't get to pick and choose when you're following the book, right? Or you do, to your point of how do you, determine that this isn't the right move for this time, but you don't get to kind of pick and choose based off of, how you exert violence and call that, by the book.
Absolutely.
And I also think, just to add to that, two more things. One is, another thing we're calling for is that for the new chief in the city and the community to set benchmarks for what needs to be accomplished over the next year, the next 2 years. If they're not met, then we think we should go to the Camden, New Jersey model, where you just sort of restart the whole police department. Last but not least, when mistakes like that are happening, you have to hold the officers accountable as well. And that is something you cannot shy away from when a 6-year-old girl is laying on the concrete. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that this is not the first time that this has happened.
Right.
I'm born and raised in Colorado, resident of Aurora, and me, myself, Senator Fields, have been to several elementary, middle school, and high schools in Aurora Public Schools where parents have been livid at the fact that their autistic children were handcuffed and taken out of schools, handcuffed, bruised, beat up inside of our schools. So I just want to echo what Jai said earlier when she said that we have normalized this culture. And unfortunately, until we see it and until it happens to us, we don't become activated.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that we have an obligation to take care of the least of us, to take care of all of us, because we are a tribe, and it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before some form of trauma will affect all of us, whether it's vicariously through what we see on social media, whether it's our children who are inside of schools and they're seeing their own friends be handcuffed, or it's us watching the little young girl be pressed down on beaming hot asphalt, crying for her mother. But the time is now, the moment is now, and we can no longer allow the people who have been in power and the cultures that they've created for them to continue. And I just want to say one other thing, and that is before Senate Bill 271, Senator Rodney Fields put forth a bill that required CSI training, which is culturally sensitive training for every police district across the state of Colorado. And so another form of accountability that we can do is we can start to investigate within each police department and find out, what does that look like inside of the police districts? What are they actually training for? That bill passed over 4 years ago. And it's clear that there's no real evidence of measures of what that training is accomplishing, or even what is the curriculum.
Right. And that's something I would love to see. I think bringing up things like this, because a lot of times we don't know what policies are really in place to hold anybody accountable. So we're like, well, maybe that can happen under this and that can't. But like you said, we need to look at the curriculum. And to Omar's point, what are the benchmarks that we're holding these people accountable to? I know, Madam President, one thing that we talked about is that this only, and I see somebody else make the comment, many of us are experiencing secondhand trauma. And then we're talking about sending our babies to school. We're talking about these things and how this spills into education. I would love for you to speak on that a little bit, how this is not just a one-tier type of incident.
Yes, just even going back to what Omar said when they said they're trained to do this, then it means that they need to be untrained, right? And going to what Maisha said, let's find out who's training and what they're training people to do, because anything that is happening, you can undo, right? And I think that when we look at reform, and we say that so often, and with so it rolls off for our tongue so easily, that we want reform, and reform for us in our community, like I always said, is like putting old wine in a new bottle. We're just slapping a new title on it and saying this is reform. That's not reform. Reform disrupts, right? Reform is reconstruction of something. And so we haven't really seen that in our police departments. We keep seeing the same thing. Thank God for 271, but where do we go from there to make sure that there's even greater steps? And I think going back to education, which is what you asked me about, I think that our kids are so, we send kids in trauma every day to school and expect them to learn. And so we don't realize that the racism that is in schools really impacts our kids' education. I can't read about Moby Dick and you just had a gun in my face. We're experiencing this in Denver right now. There was a young man that took his kids to the store on a Sunday afternoon, family trip, and someone calls and says there's a black man in a hoodie in a car. The police come, 3 cars deep. There's 3 kids in a car, 2, 7, and 14. The young girl is 7 years old. When she gets back to school, her trauma impacts the entire room. Nobody wants to know what they're talking about with Cinderella. Nobody wants to know what they're talking about Jack and the Beanstalk. Everybody wants to know, so what happened with this gun yesterday? How did this impact this? So this has impacted kids that will never see guns, kids that have not been, that don't know anything about this lifestyle. The trauma now is in the entire class. How do I roll you back to teach you after that? I can't. And all you can tell me is we apologize. And I talked to the Associated Press and I said, we don't want apologies. We want a policy change, because there has to be a change in here somewhere that says this is unacceptable. And where does this start? Common sense. I think Omar stated this too. Common sense. Where does common sense state? Does there need to be a check on an application that says, do you have common sense? That seems like that's what we need to say. We also are hiring officers that come from being in tactical situations. I'm not saying that veterans should not be hired, and I hope that is not what this comes out to be. But people that have served in war, they only know war tactics, to shoot and to kill. And so how are we even vetting people to be on the police force? What are the measures that they do just with common everyday sense, common everyday movement with people? So I think some of those are the things that we have to look at, because once kids are traumatized, we can't take that back. It's my daughter, when she was 17 at McDonald's, 4 Aurora police accosted her and her friends. She will never forget that. And my daughter is 27. And so she has no desire to see a police, deal with a police. And there's also, we know the fact that if they had contact with any police before 18, they will have contact again. So those are the things that we need to look at, so they won't even have initial contact with them. How do we look at profiling for our children? All of that. We don't want them to have any contact with law enforcement that is not positive, because you're there to protect and to serve. So how do we make that your ultimate goal? How do we train you to make that your ultimate goal, to protect and to serve?
And let me also just a tad bit of pushback there around the military, because part of it is those bad actors in the military. And one of the things that I expressed from the beginning, well, not from the beginning, but from when I became awakened to, the situations with police brutality and understanding some of the research and the numbers, the military gets a significant amount of training. So even when we are over, we, by being a veteran, right, when we go over into these war scenarios, there is a different type of training that exists. And so you don't just get to come in and just do whatever it is that you feel like you want to do. They have actual consequences, or they have stronger consequences, I would argue, in the military than they do for the civilian police here. And so to me, what that means is that our government is essentially saying that we care more about how you treat people in other countries, and than we do about how you treat our own citizens, here in this country. And so it's not that all of those that are coming out. What I would argue is that they're picking a lot of the bad apples that are coming out of the military that are not embodying some of those some of the values, that could exist in the military. So I say that to say that I see a harsher punishment exacted on military personnel who would take these types of approaches in foreign countries than we do on the civilian police here against civilians.
Yeah, and I did preface that I wasn't talking about the military. All of my family is veteran, so I definitely was not saying that. But I just know that I just want us to make sure. I just want them to make sure that when they're hiring people, that they do know the background and what they've gone through. Maybe it's some trauma in them that we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
And are they taking them through those trainings to see what affects them? What is their trigger? Right. And so that's what I was saying.
No,
and not against the military.
And I just want to make that distinction because, first of all, I'm not in the military and I'm not an advocate for the military any longer. Right. So that's a previous life. But I will acknowledge that the military spends a little bit more time assessing your mental state, putting you through more rigorous training, understanding what role you should be playing, and so on and so forth. So, if they were utilizing that type of, first of all, they're utilizing that equipment and they're not utilizing some of the background training that the military gets before that equipment is put in your hands. And I would say that is a huge gap because the military should not be sending this type of equipment over to civilian police forces without those police forces going through the proper training. And that's something they certainly don't get.
Can I dive into this just a little bit? In Aurora, the Civil Service Commission is the ones that hire the police officers in the city of Aurora. Prior to maybe about 5 or 6 months ago, it was predominantly all white and over 60. The police department doesn't even have say-so unless it's a lateral transfer in the city of Aurora. They only meet them when they come to the academy. So the Civil Service Commission is the one that does the hiring. Recently, through some advocacy work and through that thing called the ballot, when you get the right people in office, we were able to get 2 African Americans on the Civil Service Commission. Also, the Civil Service Commission deals with discipline. So when there was an Aurora police officer that called people he was protecting porch monkeys, and the chief requested that person be fired, under that old Civil Service Commission, they overturned it. So there's a lot of different levels. When you talk about systemic change, you have to look at all the different areas that impacts law enforcement, from the judicial office to the JD's office, all the way down to that application process for a law enforcement officer. So I say that to say that it's more than just being able to say, I want this person fired and I want this person hired. It's about having the right people in the right places that's going to ask the right questions and make the right decisions.
Boom, you hit on something big. And what I'm seeing a lot of comments right now, you're bringing up something that people have been talking about. And they're saying, what about just defunding the police? What do you guys feel when you hear that defunding the police, and what does that look like? And is that something that can actually happen?
I'm still trying to understand what that means. I mean, just to be totally honest, like I said, I think we can ask for reform and change how policing looks. I think there should be more community involvement in policing, of course, and let us actually sit at the table. What we do instead is make oversight boards where we just overtalk people that are on the board. And so I think defunding, how does defunding look? Does it mean bringing a lot of psychologists in, a psychiatrist in? Does it mean, what does that mean? Does it mean bringing more health professionals in? I think that we have to be very clear on what we want. We still want order, but how do we obtain that if we don't have police? I think that it needs to be reconstructed, like I said before. There's no way that you can tear up cars at FedEx and they keep letting you drive. So there's no way that you can keep having bad apples and nobody ever say anything. And I hear all the time that every police is not bad. Well, if the shoe doesn't fit, it's not your shoe. Cinderella, thank you. So those are not your shoes if you're not the person that's out doing bad. But if this is what you want to do and you're a bad apple, then we need to remove you. How does that look? What is the next steps? Like Omar said, civil service really controls a lot of this. So when we say defund, what exactly do we mean? Do we mean moving around again? Is that a reform word? Are we really ready to reconstruct and deconstruct what we're talking about?
That's good. Jason, I know you want to talk a little bit about defunding the police. Do you want to dig into that at all?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think first, if you haven't, check out 7 Generations Black, because we actually had a whole conversation about this just last night. And so we talked a little bit about, community policing and where the violence even comes from. The police are a reactive force. They are more reactive, or at least in the sense where the violence takes place, they are more reactive than they are proactive, right? So, you look at a crime that has already been committed, you file a police report. Someone brought up yesterday the statistics on that are really low for them to actually solve any crime, right? And so I think that we have to begin to look at preventative measures. And so when we talk about defunding the police, really what we're saying is that there needs to be a reallocation of funds. And so we have one of the most, our military is overfunded, and our local police forces are overfunded. There is way too many dollars that go to these types of institutions that are not going to fund organizations that can help be preventative in nature. And so we talk about this in all types of senses. You have prisons that are being funded instead of schools that are being funded. You have police forces that are being funded instead of organizations that can help with addressing violence with youth, that can help address domestic violence situations, that can help address gang situations, that can actually create opportunities for our kids to be involved in, and our adults to be involved in, mental health opportunity. I mean, the list can go on and on and on about things that are actually preventative, but there are a significant amount of funds that go to hiring new police that are ill-trained with equipment that they don't need, and then they send them out into our streets, right? So when we talk about defunding the police, one, I agree wholeheartedly that we need to rethink about how we do policing in this country, and look at more preventative measures than we do looking at, measures that are the word is, that not just reactive, but that are punitive. There we go. Punitive. I couldn't think of the word. But we need to think about things that are more on the preventative side versus the punitive side.
Absolutely. When you say that, go ahead, Maisha.
I do believe that we need to restructure the funding of our police departments. And I also think that we need to make sure our police officers have more tools on their belt, because right now the only tool they have is to arrest you or give you a ticket. And so they're not trained in conflict resolution. They're not trained in de-escalation of conflict. And they also live with their own vicarious trauma and bias. And oftentimes when they see us, brown skin, black skin, mocha skin, they immediately become triggered and alarmed and in fear for their own lives. However, I do want to put a fork and a wrench in this conversation as a victim of gun violence. I remember when my brother was murdered, and his fiance was murdered on June 20th of 2005. And I remember being with my uncles and my brother. And it reminded me of a scene from Boys in the Hood. Right after he died, and my family member saying, we need to go get those people. And I'm gonna say those people. Yeah. And I remember my mom and my grandfather, who was the highest ranking Black man in the state of Colorado as a military sergeant major, and him telling us, we need to trust the police to solve the crime. And I remember driving up and down Colfax and going to clubs and going up and down Dayton and being in cars conspicuously and watching and wearing a wire, trying to help the police find the murderers who murdered my brother. And so I would say, if we've repealed the death penalty, and I sat on the sidelines and said, I'm going to trust the police to solve my brother's crime, who is going to solve the crimes of mothers who have buried their children far too soon? In Aurora right now, I'm not talking about what police are doing to us. I'm talking about the fact that gun violence is up by 64% in Aurora, of Black people dead in the streets. And no, their crimes aren't solved. But if that was my brother, it was a different time, and my mother, and we didn't have the capacity to work with the police, and the police were defunded, I would be looking for them with the purpose to create justice on my own. And so I think we really need to understand how we solve cold cases, and how we make sure that Black bodies matter. Whether it's a Black body on the floor of asphalt and it's a 6-year-old, whether it's Elijah McClain or Javad Marshall Fields and Vivian Wolf. How do we make sure that we live and that we live out the full potential of who God has called us to be and not live in fear of gun violence, whether by police or our own people?
Man.
And gun violence is a policy issue, right? And so, this really circles back around to, I think, where we started, which was how important it is for us to be involved. You said this is a contact sport. We have to be involved in the policies that are, necessary. And so, there's, and I don't want to get into necessarily in this form, unless you take it there, Shay, or anyone, but about gun reform, because I think because you could have that as an entire conversation.
Before you make your next point, I think we have to, and that's a lot of the comments I'm getting now, we have to talk about the gun violence that's happening right here, Denver and Aurora, because we're losing every single week. We're burying a loved one, and mostly everybody under the age of 21. It's a real thing. And we have to address that in so many levels. And why is it this easy for kids to get a gun in their hand? It's easier to get a gun than a book. Like, it's real like that right now. So we have to dig into that. It's a part of the problem. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and I don't profess to have the answers to that, right? I mean, as a person who fully honors my Second Amendment right, but also as a mother, and thinking about what all those implications are. And I think, so I'll say this, I don't have an answer to that. But what I will say is that those issues lie in our policymaking and making sure that we have a seat at the table around the policies that best affect us. And one thing that, is not always the most popular of opinions, and why I'm constantly talking about the Black community, if you'll ever listen to what I say, I rarely, if ever, say Black and brown or people of color or minority. I talk about the Black community. I don't have all the statistics for the other communities. I don't know, 100% what they go through. But what I will say is that inside of our communities, we have to be at the table. We are not being represented. And every opportunity that I've had to see the back end of legislation, I would say we're not being represented. And when we come to the table, I feel like we have far too many conversations about what benefits everyone and not what benefits us. And recognizing that our community is in a different scenario and situation than other socioeconomic groups. And it doesn't mean that some of our issues don't overlap, and it doesn't mean that some of our issues do not look the same, but the root of our issues are not the same. And so I think we have to really begin to advocate for our community and stay in that lane of being sure that we are advocating for what the Black community really needs at the table.
I would love to dive into this and also bridge it with the discussion about reallocating funds for the police.
Yes.
When we began to look at some of the other cities that's doing some innovative work, some of them have teams of people that go to a call. And in that team, it's a healthcare provider, a mental health care provider, a social worker, a medical person, and a law enforcement person, just in case something goes violent. Imagine if we had that model in the Denver metro region, where you have all these different entities in the car to serve whoever needs to be served, and have the de-escalation tactics, training, have everything that's needed to serve that person right then and there. When you go deal with an unhoused individual, you have all those people right there that can set up a case file, figure out what this person needs to get off the streets, and begin to work with them immediately instead of waiting on them to catch a bus for pay $200-300 for a bus pass that they don't have. So I would love to see us reallocate those funds to that model. And let me bridge it with the other thing. If we're able to reallocate funds and be able to put in place a trauma overnight center, not trauma for medical, but trauma for youth that are in traumatic situations, such as, am I being threatened by someone and I need a place to go? Am I being threatened by a family member? Is there a gang retaliation and I need a safe place to go? We need a 24-hour place. Jason McBride been talking about this for years. It is time to work with Jason McBride. Some of the other organizations that are out there that already have a plan, they said they need a place, they need a van, they need to be able to hire some personnel and be able to have a 24-hour center for our youth can go and be able to get the resources they need before they're murdered, and as well as an opportunity to de-escalate the situation so it doesn't result in a murder. That's just one of many different things that we need to address some of these situations.
That's huge. And I keep getting this question. They're saying, where are the funds that are supposed to be allocated to help prevention of youth violence? Where are the funds? Who are they going to? Who's helping who?
They're in the police. They're in the police department. That's what they're talking about. When they're saying defund the police, I mean, some people were saying dismantle it, but the process was reallocate the funds. The police department is overfunded, and it creates a lack of funds for other organizations, right? Because by and large, Jason's organization is not fully funded. I would say, he's not here to confirm that, but I'd be willing to just speak on his behalf and say the organization is not fully funded, right? And that's what happens with most of our organizations. Our organizations are not fully funded. They are being run off the back of a single person, possibly a group of us that are putting in full-time jobs somewhere and then coming in on the back end of that to give the last bit of everything we got to the community because we don't have the funds to be able to do this full-time and create the resources, the tools, the space. There's not a lot of Black-owned spaces. There's not a lot of Black-owned programs that are fully funded, and we certainly don't have the dollars to hire each other.
Right. I just want to say that I think that we do need funding, but I just want to push back on that a little bit because, John Lewis didn't have no funding.
All right, good trouble. Go ahead.
Martin Luther King didn't have funding. And, these are people, the Black church didn't have funding. The Black Panther Party got funding through creating publications and selling their newspapers on the side of the street. And they were the ones that first established what we now know as the SNAP program and providing free lunches to kids. And so we just got to take a time out and we have to expand the universe where it's not just us 5 here or another 10. And we need to be checking in with the kids on our own block, with our own kids. We need to be asking every young person that we're around, do you own a gun? We need to be patting them down, telling them to pull up their pants, seeing, do you have a gun? Let me see it. Put it right here. You know how many guns I've confiscated in the Opportunity Center. But I think that, when God has appointed you, he requires us to do more. And I don't think that all of us are doing what we've been required to do. And that is to watch over everybody who's around us. Not only should we be asking about, do you have a gun, but we need to be making sure our babies know how to read. We need to be making sure our babies have access to jobs and apprenticeship programs and internships. And if we're not doing that, then of course they're going to be running the streets. Of course they're going to be trying to sell drugs and gang bang and sell dope and sell weed and sell mamba, because that's where opportunity is. And so I absolutely think we need funding, but we absolutely also need to make sure that all of us, including our neighbors, our grandmothers, our mothers, our sisters, the people who are on Facebook saying they're doing something, we need to be more engaged like we were in 1960 and 1950 and 1940 and 1930 and 1910 and 1619.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hear all of that, and I don't disagree with any of that. I think that we have to acknowledge the differences in the times and how far, to a certain extent, that we've been left behind, right? And so, when we're looking at it from an economic standpoint, take Denver, for example. I mean, the average home has now surpassed $600,000. Like, we're not in the same type of situation to where we can, because to me that, that's almost like we got to figure out, internally how we pull ourselves together, right? So we've got to do more. And the reality of it is that we're not in the situation because we've done less. We're in the situation because there are systems that are in place that have kept us perpetually in this situation. And so when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about the government created policies that have perpetuated the violence in our community. Everything from the government places guns in our community. The government has removed the programs out of our community. The government has closed down facilities that would be able to engage the youth in the way that you're saying. We have wage gaps. We are striving to be, live the American dream. We could talk about the gap in college where we are, the fastest, degree obtaining community. But we have a huge wage gap when we come out, right? And the networks that don't support that. And so then we have student loan debt. So then we don't own homes. So then we don't have assets. So then, right? So it's so many different layers to that, to just say that we have to learn how to do more when you have families who are, children raising children, parents can't read. They can't teach their children to read. We're stuffing them in overstuffed classrooms with no resource allocation. So, there's so many barriers to what we're talking about that we have to really utilize our leverage, where even if you can't read, you can still vote, right? And we can leverage to create the policy to overturn a lot of what the policy already has done. The policy was written very race specifically, and now it's written very race neutrally, but never undid all the damage that it caused. So I never want to take away from our empowerment, right? Because absolutely, like, we can all do more, and we can all think about how we can, create some of these things, in a way. But there, part of what I'm seeing, and this is from me not being of this community. And so let me acknowledge that I'm not from here. And a lot of the deaths and the killings that have happened, I have seen affect people who I know, but I don't know the actual people who have died, right? But what I will say is that some of the main places, things that I'm seeing with their hurt and their pain is how much they're pouring in. They're giving everything they've got and they feel like it's not making a difference. So I don't see that it's so much that we have to do more. I feel like we have to force the government to be accountable. So when I'm saying the funding, absolutely, the government is taking our tax dollars and pouring them into the police department instead of pouring them into the resources that we need for all the preventative. Everything you just said was preventative, but we don't have to support the prevention.
And I think that's a great point to bring up, because a lot of people say that they're simply surviving, not thriving, but surviving in this community. And with the deaths, with us being such a small community, the deaths are affecting people, like Joyce is saying, they're affecting people that don't even know the people that are dying. But in every situation we walk into, there's trauma in every single room. When we look at what that trauma looks like and how do we address this, one of the big things that I've been hearing from a lot of the viewers is saying that they don't feel like there's any strong Black leadership. They don't know which way to turn. They, even in the sense of saying, what does NAACP provide for us? How are they a part of the change? What does that look like? Aurora, Denver, I have you both here. Can you tell us what it looks like in the NAACP to help provide that leadership? And what are those next steps that you guys are providing to help us get in a better space?
You want me to go first? Well, I was looking at Omar like, you want me to go or you want to go? I think, just even to Joyce's point, we're all volunteers. And I think sometimes people don't realize that we are not paid to do this work. So we go to work and we come back and we have to develop programs and systems in our own community and with volunteers. And so if you don't volunteer, then it all falls on us. But what we have done, I know that we have 5 things that we stand for in the NAACP as a whole. And so we have really tried to work with economics, making sure that people can work. We have a OSHA 10 training coming up in just 2 weeks for people to get that so they can get jobs in construction, which we know during COVID, that's who was still working. We have a reading boot camp next week for kids first through 3rd grade. If you can't read, you can't succeed. So we also have voter registration, because that's very big that we vote the right people in. We are constantly doing stuff on the street, even feeding. Today is the day that we feed veterans on Wednesday. So we are in the community working, trying to get our people to another place and another level, just like every other organization is trying to do, trying to provide what we know to provide in our communities, giving them what we can give them in our hours of when we have time. Even we deal with people that are in survival mode all the time. They call us all night. My son has gotten shot. I just got fired from my job. We provide resources for that also. We walk them through cases. We have also written on several policies that have ever come through at the state legislation. We have written on all those policies. We have fought in schools for handcuffing bills. We have been there in the trenches working. Next step, or we need you to help us even do more in the community. We need your volunteerism to come and help us do more. If you see some things that we can do, we're here to hear your voice and say, help us do that, and we will do.
First of all, I want to commend my sister Sondra for the great work she's doing in Denver. I want to commend our state chair, Rosemary Lytle, who travels not just in Colorado, all the way up to Montana and Wyoming. And like was said, this is all voluntary. And when I say voluntary, let me give you an example. When someone needs to go to court and we're there advocating for them, being a pseudo lawyer, although none of us went to law school, trying to get people's sentences reduced, working with judicial districts to try to change policies in regards to diversion programs and things of this nature, serving on boards and commissions and committees. Once again, we take away time from our family. We take away time from friends. We take away time from our job that actually pay our bills to do this work. And that's not a complaint. And I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for us because we knew what we signed up for. The difference is other organizations can pick and choose what they decide to do. So they could wake up one morning and say, hey, this is what I want to do, and stick with that. But the NAACP is called upon for just about every single thing that happened in the life of a Black person. Whether if I broke up with my husband and I need help, or if, my little kid got caught stealing candy and I'm afraid my child is going to go to jail. We get all those different calls, not just from Black people, but from white people, from our Latinx brothers and sisters. We are out there doing the best we can with limited resources. We love the work we do. I accept the criticism that comes in regards to the Aurora branch of the NAACP. But I also will say we have one badass board that's kicking ass and doing the best they can and taking away from their families, taking away from their work to serve the community.
Boom.
And that's why you need to pay your membership fee today, because it's only $30 to be a member of the NAACP.
I love that you said that, really.
6 Starbucks drinks you could pay to be a member of the NAACP. And let me say this as well. You say, where does your money go? Your money goes to a lot of those programs that Sondra talked about, our youth programs. It doesn't go to us. It doesn't go in our pockets. None of us get a salary. None of us get a stipend. It goes directly to programs back into the community.
And I just want to say that I will pay for the next 4 people who want to be members of the NAACP. I will pay for them right now today for Denver or Aurora. And I just want to say I am a member of both chapters.
And that's huge, because that's what it looks like to get people that say they want to be involved, but they don't have the finances. They don't know the next steps. This is your chance to be involved. I mean, there's so many places this conversation can go. I know we're wrapping up soon, but I want to ask too, for the community that is tuned in so well, they're asking these questions, what are our next steps as a community? If you guys could all give us 2 next steps that we can do as a community, whether it be big, whether it be small, whether it be just simply showing up to the next meeting to help us get a policy together, whatever that looks like. I want our audience to have 2 steps from each of you that they can walk away with that are tangibles, because this is no longer enough just to have the conversation. And who would like to start?
I can definitely start. I can say, like Martin Luther King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl, but do something. And so I think someone said earlier on this call that people are not engaged until it's time, till the person knocks on their door. But maybe this is not how you engage. There's several layers to advocacy. And so maybe you need to just be writing letters. We need letters written to politicians, to our legislature, legislators, telling them what we need. We need people to show up at the mayor's office. We need people to show up at the police station. We need people to protest. I think that there's all kinds of levels of engagement that we're missing. Find out what you do. Some people are just helpers. They can come where you are and bring water. That's good enough. If that's what you do, then let that be your call. And I think that we need to take the anger that we now have and turn it into action. Just not be angry. Let's have action behind that. And what does that action look like? And I think that's the question that you're asking, Shay. What does that action look like? And like I said, there's several layers of engagement. All of us are not going to stand and protest. Right. I went down the first night that they were protesting. They put some tear gas in my face, and I did not return until it was time for me to speak again. Because I was like, I'm cool on this.
Not my way. And that's key. So those of you out there, your takeaway, first takeaway is engagement. And engagement at your level, knowing that every position is not for everybody, but in your purpose, you can engage to help get our community to the next level. Maisha, what would be your takeaway for our community?
I would just say that I am just so excited to be on this call with all you good Black people who are watching and this phenomenal panel. And it has been an honor and a privilege to sojourn with you. Frederick Douglass said that there is no progress without struggle. And so I have struggled with Madam President Sondra Young. I have struggled with Omar Montgomery. I've struggled with Jice. And Shay and you and I haven't gotten in the field too much, but I appreciate your voice and what you do as well. So thank you for all that you do. The Bible says that the work is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And so I never want to misconstrue anyone that I think that we need to pick ourselves up by our own bootstraps. But I do believe that we need to recognize who we are. And I believe that I am a lender and not a borrower. I believe that I have been appointed and called for such a time as this. And I think that the favor of God that is on my life is not that just belongs to me, but I think that it belongs to all Black people, because we are the chosen people. And so I would say that we need to dig deep. We need to look within, and we need to honor the strength of our ancestors and who we are and where we stand today, and know that we have everything inside of our own community to live out our full potential, to heal our land, to heal our children, to heal ourselves from the vicarious trauma, and also the long-standing complex trauma that even started over 600 years ago when we landed on Plymouth Rock. And so I think that we need to lead with a strength-based mindset. If the government gives us some scraps or some crumbs, then I'll take it. But I'm telling you that we should not wait for no one, because change will come on our backs. Just like change around getting our hair straightened came on our backs. Just like change to create light came on the backs of Black people. Just like change of creating the ice cream machine came on our backs. Just like the change of establishing the Voting Rights Act came on our backs. So I say that we need to mobilize. We need to organize. We need to stop hating on one another. We need to give unto one another's bosoms and their dreams and who they really want to be. And when everyone else tells us no, we need to get up and keep fighting forward. And if anyone ever needs to use the Opportunity Center for anything, it is available to you for free.
Come on now.
For free.
That's what a resource looks like.
Okay.
Come to a resource.
For free. Okay. And I just want to say that I paid for the Opportunity Center on my own money. Nobody gave me nothing, not a dime. But it was the community who came and gave. And that's how we got that building. And that's why we don't have a mortgage on the building. And that's why we'll always say it's open and available to our people to do whatever at whatever time of night that they need it. So, si se puede.
Si se puede. Make sure we put that the address as well for the Opportunity Center. I see some of you asking, where's the Opportunity Center? We'll put the address in there for you. So right now we have lead with your strengths, organize and mobilize, engagement. My man on the panel, what do you have for the people? What is our takeaway? What is that next step for us?
First of all, I just want to say it is an honor to be on this panel with some amazing sisters that's doing work in our community. So first, I just want to say thank you to all four of you for the sacrifices that you make and the work that you do. I want to thank the executive board of the Aurora branch of the NAACP and NAACP soldiers all across the country, the Denver metro region, for the work you're doing. I want to thank all the other community organizations that are out there doing great work, because this is not easy work. Some things we can do, some takeaways. I think we need to start what you call a block party to save Black lives. What does that mean? That means the families where we have blocks that are at risk. If we look at where the crimes, where the murders are taking place, get those families together that know the community best and start a block party to protect each other, watch out for each other, and watch out for our kids. You can organize and have a central place, but we need a block party made up of Black families to support and work with each other. Number two, we need to start Black investment groups. I see the Black Business Initiative there. We need Black investment groups. How many people know Apple is about to split at the end of the month and you need to go there and purchase some Apple shares? If you go on the app called Stash, you can buy it in pieces and don't even have to buy it whole. How many people connect with Jice, sister right here, to talk about your business plan? How many people are buying their cars from the sister that owns the Black car shop? What is it called?
Gojo Auto. Yep.
Fire, Omar.
Who's going there to purchase their cars? Last but not least, we got to vote and complete the census. Voting does work, especially in your local municipal races. I didn't win mayor, but we got 3 more votes on the city of Aurora City Council. And with the other 3 people that was already there, you got people that was Republican switching to other different view sets to make things work. Also, we got to love each other. We got to love each other. Say good morning to each other. Hug each other. Let each other know that this Black skin is great. It is lovely. It is not a cancer. It is not a curse. It is something that makes us beautiful. And when you begin to love yourself and you begin to love others, you'll never pull a trigger on someone that looks like you.
All right.
I don't know if we should be married.
Mask on. Hold it.
Can I also say, I think Jice wrote this on Facebook. I'm not really a Facebook watcher, but you know, we all have these organizations, and Omar just spoke to that. We're not here to outdo each other in organizations. We're here to work together. And sometimes we see on Facebook, I did, you didn't do, calling people out. But is that really our call to come together in unity? Let's figure out how we unite as people, Black people. I'm into Black people. How do we unite as Black people and make next steps happen in our communities? You know, and I can't leave without giving a shout out to my committee, because they are fabulous. And I have been blessed to be able to work with wonderful young minds that get it. I just got a call from a young man in Austin that has a new app that's showing how you can tape the police when they come to you. Like, it's an app that you put on your phone. I also want us to look at other people that are doing businesses like Legal Shield. Someone called me today from Legal Shield. There's an emergency app in there that you can put on your phone. Let's look at those businesses and also support those businesses that we don't know of in our community. Dig deep to see how we really can buy Black, use Black, be Black, and support each other in unity, because that makes a difference. We are our brother's keeper. Whose keeper am I? I am my brother's keeper. Right? And like Maisha said, if you have a gun on you, I'm shaking you down. Why are you doing this, young man? I told a young man today, I can't see your ass no more today. I need you to pull your pants up. I just can't do it no more today. I just followed you all through this store, and I just can't do this anymore. So, so we are our brother's keeper, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think as women, and Omar, this is no thing to you, but I think as women, Black women, we always are in the forefront of what's going on. Right? We always in the forefront of what the no is and what the now is. And so let's lead from the front. I mean, we definitely have to bring our Black men. We follow our Black men. We lead our Black men. But I want us to, as women on this call, to really start taking our steps as mothers, as friends, as neighbors, because when they don't talk to nobody else, they'll come and talk to us. Because we're mothers in the community, right? If anything is going down, they'll come and talk to us. So let's utilize this this power of a woman for our advantage to really make our young people feel that they have a home to come to. And it's us. If they need to lay in our bosoms and talk, then let's do that.
And
Well said, Madam President.
And I just want to add to that, the 1,000-man march. I think it was some sisters, and some of them may be right here on this call, that helped initiate the idea that there's some strong, beautiful brothers working hard to make it happen. They are taking in the sensitivity of COVID-19. They are making sure that people have masks and things of this nature, but they're willing to put their lives on the line to make a statement about Black men in the Denver metro region. I want to applaud those brothers, and I look forward to working with them on the 1,000-man march that's taking place August 15th at the Capitol.
I can't wait for that. Shout out to Rashad and everybody a part of that, Bates and the whole team, Mr. Herman, and I'm so excited about that because we need to see that. I need to see 1,000 Black men in Colorado because I've never seen that. So I'm excited to just see how that all shows out. Jice, any last words for our people and the steps forward and what that looks like?
And I just want to mirror the sentiments of Maisha. Thank you for having me on tonight. I do want to remind everyone to subscribe and share CTN Media because we are changing the narrative. It is time for us to take control of the narrative that we have in our communities and not allow mass media to dictate to us how we see ourselves. And I think what we've seen here tonight are leaders in our community that are telling you about the opportunities that exist for you to get involved. So there are so many. We have a shortage of none. So please find a way to get involved. And what I would say, on my end is we have to build a strong economic base. Everything that we're talking about, whether those funds come from the government, whether they come from our own pockets, we have to have a strong economic base in this community. Really, the Black Business Initiative was built on that idea of what it looks like for us to create a strong socioeconomic group so that we can begin to create legacy. And, the shameless plug here is tune into 7 Generations Black, because what we're talking about is the things that we do today are going to affect us for generations to come. We are in the process right now of making history, and we have to make the right history in order for our next generations, to reap the benefits of that. And we might not be here to see the cap put on the pyramid, but we are certainly here to continue to build our pieces of it in this generation and in this time. So my encouragement is get involved in any way possible. Gain knowledge, gain context, turn off the television sometimes because we have so much of this negative information that's pouring in, and we don't always understand how marketing, how propaganda really affect us. But we need to spend time gaining knowledge so that we can understand what it means to organize and that we can understand what it means to mobilize, and we can have context and have data and information so that we can make the right choices going forward. So there's so many opportunities to get involved, and I want to strongly encourage everyone to do that.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for showing up today. We decided to do this last minute, and you guys showed up, and you showed up with your full hearts. And I think this is important. No, I know that this is important, that we continue to mobilize these conversations. Like Jai said, we cannot let mass media dictate how we see ourselves. I truly believe there's no force greater than the force of a person determined to rise. And us as a people, we're determined to rise. We're determined to win. We're determined to change the narrative. And we're also determined to create the narrative, because all we can do is go up from here. And I believe with leaders like you in place that there's hope. There's so much hope. And there are next steps. And there are things that we can do, but we can only do them great together. One person's success, that affects the whole entire community. And so let's look at what it looks like to really be a collective and move forward. I'm excited to have each and every one of you a part of the discussion. Thank you for joining CTN Media. You guys, together we can do this. Denver to Aurora. This is not time for division, but it is time to come together. We need everyone to pull their seat up to the table, bring their toolbox, bring their gifts. They're all welcome, because we need each and every one of them to get to our next steps. I thank you guys, Mr. Omar Montgomery, Madam President Sondra Young, Maisha Fields, Jice Johnson. I'm your girl, Shay J. Make sure you remember to change the narrative. Go find us on YouTube at CTN Media. We appreciate you. Until we meet you next time, peace and love.